Now, you know and I know that Mark McGowan is going to absolutely kill it at the upcoming election. He will be the official elected Emperor of Western Australia. He will be able to do so because he has been able to successfully scare the people of Western Australia that the people to fear are your fellow Australian. That your fellow Australian is nothing but a potential virus case rather than a citizen of our own country. He's been more than happy to sit back and pretend that his state is such an economic powerhouse, despite the fact that the single biggest contributor to the Western Australian budget is, federal government grants. Monies that are raised via the GST in every other state. WA has a natural advantage when it comes to its mining sector, and certainly iron ore exports have always been able to cover many sins of many Western Australian governments. But this bloke is heading towards an election, and regardless of how popular he is going to be, he's not an actual emperor, so we're allowed to criticise him. Yes, he will win this election and win it handsomely. But this is the type of tactics that are his closing argument about why he should be given unfettered power in both Houses of Parliament to rubber stamp his every whim.
The New South Wales Premier's called state borders a national embarrassment. Do you share that sentiment?
No, that's a silly statement. That's a silly statement. The thing about the borders we put in place over the course of the last year is they worked. We used our isolation to advantage, and it worked. So I just think the New South Wales Premier is dead wrong.
So we'll take GST money from New South Wales, but we won't let the people from New South Wales visit their mates in Western Australia. As I showed you so many times last year, and I know so many people don't care, but I will keep saying it. One of the reasons why the iron ore exports were able to be such a boom in 2020 and 2021 was because of FIFO workers. FIFO workers who were not allowed to see their families for months. Families just like yours. Families that had every reason to be reunited, but they weren't because of the politics that will be rewarded on Saturday by the voters of Western Australia. But just as in Queensland, when the politics of pandemic covers up many of the sins of what a state government is actually responsible for every single day of every week, of every month, of every year that they are in power, it's about service delivery. And you should think twice about giving unfettered power to Mark McGowan. Sure, vote in the lower house, but take out some insurance in the upper house. Because under his watch, during the pandemic, during the surging economy, while he was allegedly keeping people safe, your fellow Western Australian was suffering. Because for the past 5 months, the number of people who have been waiting for treatment in hospital but having to sit in an ambulance because there is no one and nowhere to treat them has got worse every single month for the past 5 months. Just one story. A woman in Perth had to sit for 13 hours because they couldn't find a bed. She had a blood clot that if they did not deal with would have killed her. She was a breastfeeding mother and she had a blood clot of 25 centimetres in her thigh. Anyone who knows how blood clots work know they eventually move through the body, and if they get to your heart or to your brain, you are gone. Here's what she said today. She sat in triage for 3 hours before she was actually seen by a nurse. They then said, we'll try and get you through, but there's no space, no beds, no nothing. That's Mark McGowan's health system. Nurses were lovely, but they were like, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. We're stuck. This woman then had to find a Zimmer frame to get out of bed. She then spent hours waiting for a CT scan. And while the nurses were lovely, as she said, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. It was another 6-hour wait for her to get to a private room. She ended up spending 24 hours in a high dependency unit and a further 6 days in hospital. So sure, Mark McGowan will win big on Saturday. He will argue that he has a mandate for Western Australia to be a separate country. But the truth is there are people in Western Australia who are suffering as a result of the arrogance of this bloke. So sure, do what you want in the lower house, but I plead with you, please do not give this guy the unfettered power where ego will rule. And people like this lady will continue to suffer. It has got worse every single month for 5 months. The joy of having a surplus is that you are able to spend it on things like a health system that guarantees that people are treated in hospitals, not waiting in corridors or taking up an ambulance that can't go and get somebody else who needs help.